Hello everyone. Welcome to Tech Under 20. This is our first workshop for Challenge 4 if you're in Ventures. Is this the first workshop for Cup by any chance or? Yeah? No? Okay, that's cool. So awesome. I'm really happy to be leading the first workshop for both Cup and Ventures for this challenge. My name is Sam. I currently go to Queens for ECEI, which is Electrical and Computer Engineering, as part of the innovation stream. Today we're going to be talking about research and knowledge synthesis. So let me share my screen. Can you guys see my screen? Yeah?
Yep.
Awesome. Timur, you got the waiting room settled, right?
Yep.
Awesome. So keep admitting people. I will start the workshop in just a couple seconds. Alrighty, so welcome to Tech Under 20, guys. Really happy to be here and hope you guys are just as excited and hope you guys are doing well in school so far. So just to sort of debrief today's agenda, we're going to start with the research and knowledge synthesis workshop. And then we are going to have the workshop Q&A briefly. Then we're going to listen to our amazing workshop speakers for today, who are both from Entrepreneurs First. And then we're going to do the speakers Q&A. Alrighty, so let's get started. So this is the first workshop from Tech Under 20 Cup. So this is a research and knowledge synthesis workshop. Sorry, that's a mouthful. For those of you trickling in, my name is Sam and I'm leading the workshop. So just a quick self-quiz poll. I'm just gonna run something on Zoom. Would you be able to answer the two questions on the poll really quick? The first one is design thinking is a disciplined and blank approach to solving human-centered issues. And the second question is referring to the design thinking Venn diagram. We start with blank because it is important to properly define the problem and understand the needs of our user. Please just click on the polls button if there's a poll anywhere, and then just see if you can answer that question to the best of your ability. And we'll get started. I'm just going to give you guys about, I'll give you a minute. So go ahead. Awesome. So we have just under 40 people who have answered out of 76. Oh, it's climbing fast. We're almost at 45. Another maybe 30 seconds. I'm seeing some tiebreakers going on over here between interactive, iterative, viability, feasibility, maybe 5 seconds. Alrighty. So the first answer to the first question is actually iterative. So design thinking is a disciplined and iterative approach to solving human-centered issues. And then the answer to the answer to the second question, sorry, is referring to the design thinking Venn diagram. We start with the desirability because it is important to properly define the problem and understand the needs of our user. So thank you guys for participating. About 64 of you guys participated, which is amazing. Just gonna keep going ahead. So you didn't need to know anything. It's just to test where you guys are at right now. So if you guys got it right, that's great. If not, well, here's what this workshop's all about. So design thinking. So what the heck is design thinking all about? Well, design thinking is the problem-solving approach where people, users, or specifically customers are centered in the problem-solving process and working together between the developers, the entrepreneurs, and even the users to generate innovative, iterative, and practical solutions. Now, these solutions are actually born out of the intersection between the desirability from people, the financially viability process, and even the technical viability, technical feasibility Venn diagram. Now, when I talk about social desirability, I'm referring to the actual need that people have in order for that problem to be solved. Your goal is to actually speak with users and ask them what their problem and pain points are and get an understanding of what that landscape is like. Now, when I talk about financially viable, I'm really referring to like the business idea of the project. So you'd have to consider the financial constraints, the budgets. And when I'm talking about feasibility, I'm talking about the technical skill. What's the logistical and implementational strategies that need to go into creating this project altogether, and gathering the appropriate resources and people to help develop and solve that need that people have. And as you guys can see on that little corner there, when you have a perfect combination of the three, you have innovative solutions being born. Awesome. So now I'm just gonna quickly show the steps of the design thinking process. So we have empathizing, defining, ideating, prototyping, and testing. Oh, and by the way, if I'm going too fast, which I have a tendency of going fast, just please let me know, raise your hand or whatever. And
yeah, could you actually please slow down because I'm taking notes?
Oh, okay. Yeah, for sure.
Thank
Sorry
you.
about that. I'll slow down a little bit. And just a heads up that I will be making the slideshow available for everybody. So if you miss something, you can either message me or just look at the presentation later. Alrighty. So going back to the design thinking process, we have empathizing, defining, ideating, prototyping, and testing. Now, what does this all mean? Well, to be effective at applying design thinking, the design thinking principles, you need to think like a designer. Well, that's a no-brainer. But you need to specifically think like someone who dreams of crazy ideas, takes time to tinker, and test those ideas in practice. For programmers, to almost think of it almost like a for loop. You keep iterating with each pass. You keep trying and trying again, and you keep thinking and tinkering and try to tune it up to the point where you can actually get something going. So in terms of the other things, a designer stays true to the fundamental principle of keeping people in the center. And that's literally what design thinking principles are, literally keeping people at the center of every decision-making process that takes place. And a designer cultivates empathy, optimism, iteration, creativity, and ambiguity. This keeps people, while keeping people in the spotlight and listening to them wholeheartedly, ensures that you as a developer and entrepreneur are staying focused and staying destined to creating solutions that meet people's needs. So does that make sense? Like you're basically keeping people at the forefront and in the center of your vision, and you're trying to incorporate different things together that will help address that need a little bit more specifically. Now, in today's workshop, we're going to be covering the empathizing, defining, and ideating portion. And in the workshop next week, that's going to be run by our friend Timur. It's going to be focusing on prototyping and testing. So going back into the empathy stage, the goal for defining that first step is to really see things the way that your users see things. And what I mean by that, and the best way of being able to see the perspective and seeing and understanding the perspective of your users is by actually asking them. Just ask questions and interviewing them. To develop empathy, we need to see things from the user's perspective. And people might have a tough time explaining themselves. So it's really critical for us as an interviewer to frame questions in such a way where it's the most appropriate in extracting the insights that we're looking for. Now, as an interviewer, there's actually 4 steps to asking really good questions from your users. So the first step is actually just designating 1 to 3 people to ask questions. And you might be asking me, what do you mean by 1 to 3 people? Like, why is that even a step? Well, there's all about playing with the interviewee's subconscious. We don't want to overwhelm the interviewee. We don't want to feel them. We don't want to make them feel like they're under pressure by any means. And we need to, and when we're conducting these interviews, we need each person that's helping out with the process to play a role, to have a specific role to play. Whether it's actually asking the questions, recording the answers, or even photographing or recording, the actual footage of the interview, each person needs to have a role, and it shouldn't be sort of fostering an environment where it's overwhelming for the user. Now, the second step is actually to start with broad questions, get closer to your challenge as you keep going. And what I mean by that is you come prepared with a set of questions and you ask, and you, as I said, start off with very broad questions about the person's life, the person's values, or even the person's habits to get an understanding of who they are as a person. Now, that being said, you want to sort of narrow down into towards the challenge that you're trying to get towards, and you want to ask questions that go to that area. Now, the third step is actually not making any assumptions that the user is sort of when the user is saying, okay. So anyways, so you don't want to assume what the user is saying, and you want to note answers down exactly. And you don't want to make any assumptions because that could sort of flaw your thought process, similar to the interruption we just had. So you want to process and record exactly what the user is trying to say. And the goal is you're trying to understand exactly what the user is trying to feel and being able to convey that in your notes. And the last step is to observe the body language and the context of which the user is communicating. Part of the interview is not just listening to what the interviewee is trying to convey, but also trying to understand what their nonverbal gestures are trying to communicate as well. Verbal communication is just one data point, but you want to gather as much info as possible so that you're able to understand exactly what the user is trying to feel. You can also conduct group interviews to quickly understand what community dynamics are and what their needs are specifically. It won't give you as much information or as much depth as a solo interview, but it will provide a larger scope to see when understanding how people operate in a large group. You can also interview experts who offer system levels understanding within your area. And that way they can explain the recent sort of innovations or changes from banks, governments, and other organizations that are specifically working in the area that you're trying to sort of disrupt. Yeah, if you guys have any questions, just feel free to ask along the way. The chat's open, and Timur, just like ping me if there's any question that needs to be answered. Alrighty, so now next is defining the step 2, which is basically define. And the goal in this in the define stage is to actually synthesize your observation and form insights to unearth hidden opportunities. And the best way to do this is by actually asking why. By asking why, you're actually understanding the specific needs of the user, and you're forming insights. By forming insights, you're able to unearth those opportunities that are actually hidden from before. Not even they're visible, they're just hidden from before. You don't want to form any judgments in this process, and you want to identify the problem that you're trying to solve. The problem that you're trying to solve might be different from what you've identified in the past, but that's okay, because in the defining stage, you're really trying to understand what the space is all about. Now, the end goal or the end destination you want to get to is actually creating a problem statement. You want to create a problem statement that's broad enough to welcome unexpected opportunities, but narrow enough to know where to start. So you want to focus on individuals and their emotions. You want to have active language. You want to have logical wording, strong insights, and you want to be able to generate possibilities from these problem statements. And a good way of doing that is by generating how might we statements, which will help guide brainstorming and be able to launch your ideation when you get to the next stage. Now, I'll give you an example of a problem statement that's very, very narrow. How might we redesign an ice cream cone that doesn't drip? Well, why is it too narrow, you might ask? Well, it's really narrow simply because of, it's really focusing on ice cream cone and its drippability. I don't know if that's a word, but you're really focusing down on a very, very small area. You don't know too much. And at the same time, something like how might we redesign dessert is something completely different, and it's way too broad. We don't know what we're going to be solving in this space. But maybe a a problem statement that would be more of a Goldilocks, just right sort of example would be, how might we redesign dessert to make it more portable? Do you guys get what I mean? It's enabling you to focus on the criteria we said earlier, which is it's narrow enough to know where to start, which is basically dessert. You've established the individuals and their emotions. You're using active language, and you're creating possibilities for any solutions that you want to develop. So how might we questions are a really good way of getting started. Now, the other thing that you need to consider is when you're making your own problem statements, you should probably use the criteria to help you filter out, help you ensure that you're creating a good problem statement. And there's three really good questions that you can ask yourself, which are at that bottom pyramid right there, which are, what is it about your problem statement that makes you feel like it is appropriately user-centered? So you want to keep in mind that the design thinking process is all about keeping people, specifically your users, at the forefront of any decision that you're making. How is it going to impact your users? Is it going to meet the need that they have? And making sure that you're able to keep that in mind continuously is very important to, apply the design thinking process very effectively. The next question is, what makes you think that your problem statement is broad enough? And the final question is, what makes you think that your problem statement is narrow enough? Yeah, so we're at the end of the slide. Yeah, you can definitely ask your question, Bashar.
So I just had a personal experience with, Panera Bread, and they sent me an email with, feedback, and I was only giving them feedback because I was not happy with my service. Now that question leads on to, how do you make sure that people give you feedback with no bias? Like, because Amazon, right? Like, say if you give a really good review to someone, they're like, "Oh, we'll send you a free wireless charger." So what do you do to get good feedback which isn't biased? So I just have a question about that.
So that's a good question. So how do you get feedback without bias, you asked?
Yeah, like how do you get mass feedback which is not biased from your
Yeah.
customers?
So biased in what way? Because there's different ways to, dissect that problem or dissect that question in general. When you're applying the design thinking process, you want it to be, you want to get feedback that's enabling you to better solve the problem than it was solving before, right? If you're talking about bias in the context of having a vendetta against Amazon and just going off or whatever, right? That is bias, yes. So I think when you're in your earlier stages, you should definitely keep in mind that you're trying to create possibilities and opportunities to benefit your users. You want to solve the problem better. So I don't know if you should worry about that too much, but just keep working with the target market that you're trying to deploy your solution to. So if your solution is targeting, let's say 18 to 24-year-olds, work with 18 to 24-year-olds and get them to test your product or service. If they inherently hate your product, right? Ask them why they hate the product, right? Keep asking why. Why do they hate the product? Why do they not like it? Why do they like it, right? And getting to those fundamental truths will enable you to make better decisions when you're converging your ideas in the prototyping stage. Does that answer your question, Bashar?
Yeah, so you pretty much said to focus on a small group of people and ask them about your product. Like, just a small group of people, not a huge group of people. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, you whether it's large or small, like you just have to work with people. That's all it is. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
work with your users, right? If you're working,
So,
yeah.
sorry, Sam, I just wanted to jump in. So one of the parts where it actually is a very important skill in interviewing people is not asking leading questions or not having an outcome in mind, right? So if you say, if you're sitting down with a group of people and you're saying, isn't ice cream the best dessert, right? That's sort of, you're leading the user somewhere, or you're saying, oh, when you're tired and hot on a Friday night or whatever, like, what are you going to eat, right? So that's kind of leading the user on. So asking those open questions helps eliminate the bias. So when you say, can you tell me about what kind of food you enjoy to snack on, let's say, right? Eventually, based on those answers, it's like, okay, can you tell me more about the desserts you eat? Why do you eat them? And sort of go like that, rather than sort of asking questions that might get to a result, right? Because if you come in trying to prove that ice cream is the best result or the best dessert, you might get that result just because you like created that kind of environment and let people on. So that's where being a good interviewer and a good designer is really important. And you sort of learn those skills after more and more practice.
All right. Thank you so much for your answers.
Thanks, Dennis. And I think someone else had a question. Okay. If you have any questions, like feel free to stop me. But yeah,
hi. Can I sorry to interrupt? I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I was wondering how can you create a business that allows your employees to empathize with your product?
It's a good question. So empathize is essentially seeing what the user sees in their perspective, right? Being able to do that. And if you want to get your product that helps your users, it needs to be able to fit into their lives. So going back to what Dennis was saying, asking those open-ended questions and specifically asking why you're encountering a problem, and really getting to the depth at which you need to get to in order to solve your problem will help you to develop a solution and being able to scale that up into a proper tangible business. Yeah.
Oh, hey, sir.
Yep.
All right, I have another question. So,
Yeah.
all right, I gotta lead my group. They're kind of waste mans. Well, how do I lead my group into succession, dude? Like, I'll be real with you. They're kind of waste mans, dude. I don't know what the hell to do with them, bro. Help me out, brother.
So I think you should have an honest conversation with them and definitely ask them why they're unable to do their part. If you really feel like they're unable to stay accountable, I would just definitely quit the group and work on your own. Yeah. Alrighty. We're gonna go on to the next slide because we're running out of time. If you have any questions, we can ask at the end. And the last stage is the ideation stage. And your goal here is to assess your ideas, filter them, and sort them to innovate a desirable, feasible, and viable idea. So when you have a really good problem statement, it's really good to sort of come up with as many ideas as you can individually, and then come together and sort of work as a group to figure out which ideas make the most sense from a desirability point of view, from a viability point of view, and from a feasibility point of view. And to do that, some of the techniques that you can use are grouping ideas together. So if there's specific ideas that have either that have similarities, or they might have, or if you're able to incorporate a combination of ideas to create a wholesome solution, group them together, right? Maybe by grouping these ideas, you might be able to come up with something very creative that you might have not otherwise thought of before. So that's one way you can do, you can sort of land onto your solution. The second thing is, once you start to group your ideas, your team members should vote on ideas using a criteria. So each member should be able to sort of assess whether it's able to meet the user's need very, very thoroughly. Is it exciting to work on? And does it sort of connect to the challenge that's at hand? And if you're using this criteria to sort of filter the ideas, if you're able to filter your ideas using this criteria, you should definitely be able to land on a solution that fits those three criteria that we set earlier on. So always keep in mind that you really want to focus on the user. You want to make sure that you're solving their need very effectively, and you want to achieve product market fit. And the only way to achieve product market fit, like someone was asking before, is by meeting the user's need. If you're able to meet the need, then you'll achieve product market fit, and you'll be able to scale your idea into a business, and yeah, keep going. In terms of anything else, there's only two last things I sort of want to leave you guys with before we go into our speakers presentations. And these are things that you should keep in mind once you start applying the design thinking process. And the first thing is you need to fail often, or you need to fail fast, sorry, and you need to fail often. And if you're looking at this graph over here, when people start off their entrepreneurial adventures or whatever, they start off extremely confident and very, very excited. And then as time starts to pass, they experience a sort of dip, and they start to feel very unmotivated, very like, they don't want to work on this. They don't feel the same level of excitement as they had when they were starting, the project. And it's totally like understandable, because when you keep failing over and over again, it almost feels like, people are ripping your idea apart extremely aggressively. But by continuously failing and failing fast, right, speeding up that iteration cycle, you're going to be able to meet the user's need even better, right? Whether it's 5 times, 10 times, or 100 times, the sixth time, the 11th time, or the 101st time, you will meet that user's need. And by then, you will start to see an increase in the number of people that are using your solutions. And that's when you start to see your confidence starting to go back up, start to feel happy. So if you guys are encountering failures in the beginning, you don't need to worry too much, because it does happen. Keep trying to fail fast, though. Keep trying to iterate. It will happen, but you will get through it. The last thing I want to sort of touch on is this very nice picture of a bunch of doors. I'm just kidding. When you're making decisions, you need to keep in mind this sort of analogy that I'm going to tell you. There is a one-way door, and there's always a two-way doors. I'm not sure if you've heard this decision-making system before, but one-way door decisions are basically decisions that you cannot easily reverse. They require time and thought before being made. Whereas two-way door decisions are decisions that you can easily reverse when you encounter something sort of adverse. And at the same time, you can easily reverse them if you encounter an issue along the way. And because you can easily reverse them, it's going to speed up the process when you need to go back a step. And you're not necessarily scrambling. You don't need to worry too much. You can always just go back if you need to. Being able to go back a step and take a step back and start from a somewhat lower point, but go to explore a different height altogether, is very, very important in making your business very adaptable and pivotable. There is not a one-size-fits-all solution in terms of creating decisions that help your company. You need to separate your decisions between a one-way door decision and a two-way door decision. And keeping in mind that these factors will help you work faster and increase your productivity is very important, because this will help you become faster and keep you on track to achieving that product market fit. You want to ideally have more of those two-way door decisions, because it will help you. But one-way door decisions are very good in terms of coming up with something groundbreaking. So I hope that you guys learned something in this workshop. Just to recap, you should always think, tinker, and test throughout your journey as an entrepreneur or as a student. It'll really help you. The process is very valuable, and try to apply the design thinking process while you can. So today we covered the empathize, define, and ideating stages, in the design thinking process. And next week on Tuesday, Timur is going to be running the prototype and testing stages. And please be mindful of the chat, guys. We are trying to make this a very comfortable environment for everybody. Please don't be negative. Please try not to be too funny. It can be funny, but keep it to a minimum. Awesome. Do you guys have any questions so far about the workshop or anything?
What is Timur's product?
Oh, that you're gonna have to wait till next week.
Nice.
Yeah. Which door would you pick? It's a good question. Depends on the decision that I'm trying to make. If it's a programming decision, as in I'm creating a prototype and I need to iterate, definitely frame it as a two-way decision, two-way door. If it's something like thinking about a target market for my business, that would be a one-way door decision. In terms of programming, there is a lot of technical help during the cup. And yeah, so there's a lot of people that are going to help you. You're going to have mentors. So definitely check in with the cup team. In terms of timing, we need to get started with the speakers. I see that we have our speakers here ready to go. So let's get started. So today we have Maya and Lucy, who are both talent investors from Entrepreneurs First. Maya and Lucy, would you guys like to introduce yourself really quickly?
Yeah, thanks so much. My name is Maya. I lead talent here at Entrepreneur First Toronto. And excited to tell you a little bit more about the program, but a bit about me. Before EF, I was at Creative Destruction Lab and leading corporate partnerships there. So some of you might be familiar with that program. Outside of that, my background is in economics and math. And so that's a little bit about me, but I'm joined by my colleague, Lucy, who is also here on the talent team, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Thanks, Maya. Hi, everyone. My name's Lucy. I work closely with Maya on the EF Talent Toronto team. Essentially, my job is to help interview and select the next brilliant group of individuals and founders who will be joining EF in April. Prior to EF, I have a background in human resources. I've worked at startups like Hired and previously Indeed. And so I'm very excited to be speaking with you today.
So on that note, is it okay if we share our screen and kind of go through our presentation?
Yeah, absolutely. We're really excited to get started.
Thanks, guys. I see lots of engagement in the chat, so I'll go ahead and share my screen. Oh, it says host disabled attendee screen sharing. So if you could just let me share.
Uh-oh. What about now?
Yep, we're good to go.
Awesome.
Here we go. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Great design, by the way.
Thanks. So really nice to meet all of you guys. The goal for today is really to share more on EF, answer your questions, and help you decide if this is a program you might consider down the road based on your current career aspirations. So the setup is kind of like 20 minutes of content, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. We'll focus on what the program looks like, what we look for in founders, and then I'll flip it over to Lucy, who will feature some alumni and talk about current cohort members, and then we'll flip it over to questions. But Entrepreneur First Toronto. So unlike your typical incubator, EF is really focused on you as an individual. In Toronto, we built our first cohort in October, where we brought together 50 exceptional individuals from diverse backgrounds and skill sets in order to help them find a co-founder, build their idea, mentor them, all with the goal of raising a pre-seed only 3 months after joining the program. Essentially, we're the fastest way for ambitious individuals to build the next generation of tech companies from scratch. So EF Canada, we're pretty new to Canada. However, we have built a successful model globally over 9 years, starting in London and then expanding to Singapore, Bangalore, Berlin, Paris, and now Toronto. Over the years, we've built 300 technically defensible companies, over 6 countries valued at $2 billion US. We have over 3,000 alumni that have gone through the program, and this network opens up to you as soon as you begin your EF journey. And the community there is really amazing. So this photo is a photo of one of our first cohorts in London. We had several companies that ended up exiting and getting a Series A or a Series B. And there's one company in this cohort called Magic Pony, which was acquired for $150 million by Twitter only 18 months after they met at EF. And although this was one of the first cohorts, we continue to build 2 cohorts a year in the 6 different cities, and the results have been quite consistent. But if you're already here and involved with Tech Under 20, you've already taken the step to say, I'm interested in entrepreneurship. And that's why we're really excited to be here and talk to you today. So here at EF, we look for people who have extraordinary potential that we can help propel to actually build companies from scratch. And when I say scratch, I mean it. Pre-team, pre-company, pre-idea. And so the pre-idea thing might sound a little bit weird, but what I mean by that is we don't even look at ideas in the application process. We are strictly focused on your experiences and your expertise, because we've had times where we've turned down people with great ideas. We've had people that have had great ideas and we've been misguided. And so it's better to focus on your experience and expertise, and we stray away from that until you're actually in the program. So the thing about forming a company with someone you just met in 3 months sounds kind of crazy, right? A little bit risky, but realistically, the riskiest thing you can do is stay in your corporate role. The opportunity cost only gets larger and larger. It only becomes harder to step away from that comfort. And so you guys probably know people in university that are coming out of their bachelor's, maybe going into consulting or investment banking or working for a big tech company, but you likely don't know too many founders. And maybe that's not true, but EF is trying to normalize that. They're trying to make entrepreneurship more encouraged and break down some of the barriers that restricts young people from taking that route. So I'm going to go a little bit into how the program really works. So the program is split into 2 parts, form and launch. And so the purpose of form is to find a co-founder with the complementary skill set. In order to help you be most successful in the pairing process, we create this group of 50 individuals, and we really care about composition. So we look at 3 different personas, or what we call edge, and edge is basically your competitive advantage. So the first edge is very technical. It's usually backed by a PhD, someone that's an expert in their field. But the second is your builder profile. So maybe like a software engineer or software developer. And then the third is the business-minded person. So someone that's really experienced with go-to-market strategies. In our first cohort here in Toronto, what it looked like is we help you better define your edge so you can pitch yourself to the other people. And in your first week, we want you in your first team. And that doesn't necessarily mean you stay with this person for the rest of the 3 months. You could work with that person and 24 hours later, you might say, you know what, we are not a good match, or I don't even like this person. And that's completely fine, because you have 48 other people that you could be working with. And so we want you to be back in that pool, finding your next founder that could be a much better fit. So we don't want you to waste time. I think in 8 weeks, we had 53 formations and like 31 breakups, just to kind of show you how that's normalized. So then you form your team, you come up with a commercially viable idea. And in addition to that, we actually pay you to quit your job or quit school. So we're paying you $3,500 a month in those first 3 months. 13 weeks have gone by, you formed, you've broken up, you formed, and you come up with something technically defensible. You then pitch to us, Dragon Den style, and we have the option to invest $100K for 10% of your company. The second part, if you get that 100,000, you move over to launch, and you go out and you validate your business. You're talking to customers, you're turning that idea into an MVP, really driving traction so that you can come to our demo day and pitch to us and other investors that we bring in and raise quite a bit of money. So typically we see that 75 to 80% of our teams end up raising a seed round within 6 months of our demo day, and the average seed is about $1.4 million. So after 6 months, we have our demo day. After the demo day, we continue to support you with intros to VPs or venture capitalists or investors or whatever that may look like for you. So here's a screenshot that I love, and this is kind of live in action breakups. And of course, we have asked if we can share this, but every time a team forms, it's posted on our Slack channel. Every time they break up, it's posted in our Slack channel. So you can see Anastasia and Lindsay have broken up, and a ton of emojis. And so half the people reacting here are saying, yes, Anastasia is now available. I can work with her. And same thing goes for Lindsay. And so you can't see in the replies, but Anastasia and Lindsay basically endorse each other. They're saying, this is what I loved about Lindsay. This is why it didn't work out. This is why I think she would be a great co-founder. So next, what do we really look for in our founders? It's different between CEOs and CTOs, obviously. And so for our CEOs, we're looking for that commerciality. What commercial value have they created? What opportunities do they see in the market? Versus our CTOs that are more technical, how's their technology unique or rare, and how well can they communicate it? But the thing that's consistent across the board is the behavioral side. And I'm sure something that all of you think about and are working on as you kind of continue and start your career, even within the early stage of academics. And so the first thing we're looking for is, do you challenge convention? So how are you different relative to your peers? What risks have you taken? How are you exceptional? The second is what we call drive to achieve. So how do you overcome barriers? Walk us through examples where you've been incredibly resilient and nothing could get in your way in order to reach your goal. And then finally, what we call followership, which I love because it's different than leadership. It's how do you bring people together towards a common goal, which you can imagine is super important in an early stage company, right? You don't have the resources to pay someone you want. And so building that vision and mission is super important. And so as you guys are, I think, in your late high school stage or early university, you can start thinking about what student organizations you're getting involved with and what are you doing outside of school. Maybe it's athletics, maybe internships that can all help kind of grow these behaviors. And so before I flip over to the next slide, Lucy is going to highlight some of our alumni. And so you'll see diverse backgrounds there and ages all across the board. And then she will highlight some of our cohort members as well. So over to you, Lucy.
Thanks, Maya. All right, so first up, we have James. So James is the founder and CTO of a company called CoMind. He's definitely an outlier, and this is a rare situation for EF. But one of the reasons why we wanted to highlight James today is that he actually joined the program straight out of high school. So James started programming when he was 13 years old. He decided to leave high school to pursue a role as a full-time software engineer. And while he was working, he developed a brain-computer interface technology and left his job to focus on this full-time. He continued to develop his skills in machine learning through taking online classes, self-study, and later he applied to join EF when he was 18 years old. So James joined EF because he wanted to build something, which is what he excelled at. He had previously built 5 apps. One of them was a homework app for his high school with a collective 10,000 downloads. A main reason for him joining EF, though, was the opportunity to meet his co-founder. And thankfully he did. So James's co-founder and the COO of CoMind is named Christina Francescides. She came to EF with an academic background in management and finance and professional experience in investment banking and venture capital. So now CoMind is building a non-invasive brain-computer interface that actually allow for communication with the brain. This is made possible by a new form of neural imaging technology coupled with advanced machine learning techniques. Since meeting Christina in 2019, CoMind is now a venture-backed startup. So their mission is to create the next computing interface while simultaneously improving our understanding of the human brain. So this happened recently, only a couple years ago, not even, and we're very excited to see what's in store for them. Next up, we are highlighting Alex Daliac, who is the co-founder and CEO of Tractable, which utilizes AI to assist accident and disaster recovery worldwide. So this is really impactful because, as we all know, accidents and disasters are very disruptful to lives, yet assessing insurance claims can take a human appraiser weeks or even months. So their technology uses computer vision, and it takes just minutes to assess and create estimates, ensuring that that auto repair ecosystem can work up to 10 times faster with fewer inaccuracies and lower costs. Alex first applied to EF while he was an undergraduate student at the London School of Economics, studying econometrics and mathematical economics. He made it to the interview stage that first time, but he actually missed out on a place because while he had that CEO hustle and commerciality that Maya mentioned, he didn't know enough about technology. So Alex went and did a conversion course in computer science. A year later, he reapplied to EF again and got in this time. So in the EF London cohort is where he met his co-founder, Raz Van Ranke, who is a computer scientist, and he left his PhD in machine learning to join EF as well. Together, they founded Tractable. And so having joined EF a year out of his master's, Alex is now the CEO of a company that's raised 50 million in VC funding, employs over 100 people globally, and has helped settle over $1 billion in claims. And so a quote from Alex that really stood out to me goes as follows. We've gotten to a place in our careers that could have taken us 20 or 30 years in just 5. By simply deciding we didn't want to wait. EF gives you that opportunity to accelerate your life and do what you really want to. On the next slide, we have Dornoosh Zornubi, who is the CEO and founder of a company called Meadow. Meadow is an ultrasound platform that's non-invasive, portable, and low cost to assess birth defects in infants. So this new technology is looking to analyze ultrasound images, which will make diagnosing health problems possible, even from remote locations. She's actually based in Edmonton in Canada and currently in the middle of raising a large Series A, although she's originally from Iran and she completed her PhD in medical machine learning in Singapore at the National University of Singapore. So she came to Alberta to study at the Amy Institute and focused specifically around that research field around infant disease and ultrasounds. Unfortunately, EF Toronto had not yet launched, so she joined the EF cohort in Singapore. They've recently received clearance from the FDA for their AI product, which accurately diagnoses hip dysplasia in infants. And this is super important because when this condition is diagnosed early, it can be treated and actually eliminates the eventual need for hip replacement surgery. And so the last founder profile that we have is Zeehan Wang. So Maya mentioned Magic Pony, which is one of the more prominent success stories of EF. Zeehan has a PhD in computer vision and biomedical image analysis, and he's the CTO of Magic Pony, which exited to Twitter for $150 million only 18 months after meeting his co-founder, Rob Bishop at EF. And Rob actually had only 1 year of work experience as a software engineer when he joined EF. So funnily enough, they were actually in each other's immediate networks. They were studying together at Imperial, but they didn't know each other. So thankfully, they met at EF, where they founded Magic Pony. And so Magic Pony is a video and image compression technology, which improves traditional compression pipeline in post and pre-processing. And so since Rob and Zeehan have exited, they have become avid investors in our global fund that we use to support our current portfolio. And so now that we've highlighted a few of the founder stories, hopefully that gives you kind of a better idea of their backgrounds. But the truth is that there are many different paths into entrepreneurship. So to give you an idea, we've received over 900 applications and accepted 55 founders to join us from Canadian schools, such as the University of Waterloo, Queen's, and McGill, to institutions abroad like the University of Oxford, Harvard, and MIT. And then also very true to Canada being multicultural, we have over 20 countries represented within our cohort, which is pretty neat. And so in addition to our founders joining us from academia, we've also had individuals leave their positions with companies like Google, Goldman Sachs, Shopify, in order to join EF, meet a co-founder, and build their own company. In terms of some more of our local founders to Toronto. So first up, we have Purya. He's a CTO. He has a patent in neural networks. He was also doing research out of the Amy Institute in Alberta. And he has a really high expertise in natural language processing. He decided he wanted to have more of an impact. He left his PhD and he's now working with an individual who founded and was the CEO of a marketing company in Toronto, which was acquired a few years ago for $65 million. So that's a team that we're quite excited about. William also comes from a master's degree in computer science from Waterloo. He was most recently a data scientist at Borealis, which is a division of RBC. And he was part of a team there which deployed their first reinforcement learning model to production in RBC's regulatory environment. Lindsay is also a data scientist from RBC. Something really interesting about her research in image classification is that she built a tool for holographic microscopy, which was picked up by Huawei and is now being used by them. Anastasia has led product divisions at places like Element AI and Achievers. She most recently built a home search platform that's being used by one of Canada's biggest banks. Rob is known as a serial head of growth. So he joined a startup called Borrowell in the financial lending and benefit space at seed stage and grew with the company. But most recently, he led growth at a real estate company at the Series A stage called Properly and was instrumental in ensuring a $100 million raise. And lastly, we have Anwar, who has recently graduated from Western in 2020 with a bachelor's degree in computer science. He was the co-founder and VP of technology for the largest computer science club at Western. And prior to joining EF, he gained experience as a front-end and full-stack web developer. He is currently in a team with an individual from a product background. They're working on a data usage tool in the AI space. So we can't wait to see how they're going to do in the internal investment round this week. Back to you, Maya.
Thank you. So obviously we talked about how these co-founders meet, but it's not only curating that room of 50. We have exceptional staff and mentors that are working with them on a weekly basis. And so here are some of our mentors involved at EF. That I would love to highlight. And so all three of them were actually previously entrepreneurs, some of them serial entrepreneurs, and then Milad and Alex are also angel investors. So not only can they kind of teach you from their mistakes, they're there to poke holes at your business idea, challenge you if you're the right person to solve the problem, and if you're the right co-founding team. But also our investors know where the money's going and so can guide on market opportunities there too. So first we have Milad, who is the founder of Mechanos, and he's also a partner at Good AI Capital. He's based out of Chicago, but very involved in the Canadian tech community. We have Alex Norman, who is a partner at AngelList, a partner at N49P, and a co-founder of TechTO, which you guys might be aware of. And then finally, Rachel, who's our general manager here at EF. She was also the co-founder of FiveCrowd. She was in a corporate role for a couple years out of university at J&J, leading marketing and strategy there. And when she let J&J know that she was leaving, they were throwing more money at her and doing everything to keep her, but she really wanted to build from scratch. And so she left and ended up building her own company, which was acquired 3 years later. And so that's our mentors here. But I flip it over to you guys. I want to open it up to questions. I know we have about 20 more minutes or a little bit less. So I'm here to answer any of the questions you guys might have about the program, or if you're thinking about entrepreneurship, please ask away. Okay, I see a question in the chat. How easy is it to apply to the program? What's the success rate of the companies? So 2 different questions, both great questions. So the application is available on our website, joinef.com. Anyone can apply. And so our application deadline is February 14th. In terms of success rate, that's a really good question. So if we go back to the program breakdown, there was the first 3 months, about 40 or 45% of the teams will get that 100,000 from EF. Of those teams that move on to the final 3 months, 75 to 80% of the teams will raise a seed round. So hopefully that answers the success rate. How do you gauge potential? Good question, Alexander. So something that I highlighted on the behavioral side was that challenging convention. And so the way we look at that is how do you differentiate relative to your peers? So maybe you're in a computer science degree and you're a third-year student, and unlike your other computer science students, you have already had multiple internships, or you tried starting your own thing and failed, but you have some sort of something to show for traction. It's really looking at you relative to your peer group and who you would identify as your peer group. So that's a big thing when we look for that potential piece. You mentioned your portfolio value is 2 billion. What percentage of that are Series A, B funding, and what percentage are acquisitions? Good question. I don't know if I have those numbers off of hand. I'd be happy to follow up with you, Kevin. Lucy, do you mind writing that down for me, just for me to follow up? But we've been operational for about 9 years, so we don't have a ton of acquisitions yet, but I'd say a good majority is at Series A, B, and so Lucy highlighted quite a handful, but our portfolio is also accessible on our website, and we actually are industry agnostic, so you'll see companies kind of within every industry.
I have a question, Maja.
Yeah.
So for high school students, if we have a great idea, say if we compete in this Tech Under 20, will we be able to apply?
Sure, absolutely. I will say that, so when you look at our current cohort, Anwar, who is highlighted in our first cohort, the last person Lucy spoke to, he is currently the youngest in our cohort. And so he had just graduated his bachelor's, but there's no age limitation. But the other thing that's important to note is that we don't assess ideas, just because I think it's easy to have an idea and not be able to execute, or maybe you have a bad idea, but you actually have huge potential. So we really stray away from evaluating ideas. And so maybe you have a great idea and you apply with your idea. However, we're going to dig deeper into some of your experiences and what sets you apart. Or maybe this project, you've already taken it to a certain level and we're blown away. And so there's no limitations. And so if you want to apply, I would encourage you to apply. And then if you want feedback on your application, I'm happy to connect there too. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, just a follow-up question. I'm not sure if I have your contact information, because I would probably be applying sometime in the future, because I feel like EF is something I really need. It's like a miracle that it exists. I have a few questions regarding what you just said. Number one, is there any what's called sort of penalties if you apply, or is it no? And
Yes.
Also, what universities do you prefer?
What, pardon?
What universities do you prefer? Like if you talk about education, like do you prefer Warlu? Like do you look at rankings? Do you look at GPAs? Stuff like that.
Okay, good question. So in terms of applying and being rejected and applying again, I think that it can actually be pretty admirable if we see that you've done a lot since the first time that you have applied and you've taken our feedback and really like turned it around. We love that. And so we've had applications like Alex Daliac. He was featured on our presentation today. He's the CEO of Tractable. Tractable just raised like 30 million by Georgian partners here in Canada, their Series C. He was rejected the first time around. So absolutely, that does not hurt your application if we were to reject you and you were to reapply. And then your second question was about schools. So it's not like we have a list of ranked schools, but generally like some of the stronger technical schools like Waterloo, we look at U of T, strong business schools like Western, Queens, I guess generically McGill, UBC, but it's not a huge signal. So yeah, coming out of a top institution maybe adds a little bit of a bonus to your application, but there's so many things we're looking outside of that's not really like a make it or break it for us.
Also, thank you so much for your feedback, Maja.
No problem, and feel free to reach out. I've posted my email in the chat. I have a few more questions here. So, Sabi, and apologies if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, but how are we different than other incubators? A lot of incubators are looking at you when you already have a co-founder and when you already have an idea. And so they're helping you accelerate that idea and get you the funding and mentorship. And so in that way, we're similar. But the real difference here is we are looking at you as an individual and helping you find your co-founder that really complements your skill set. That's one thing. Two, we de-risk it. We actually pay you to join us. So you're getting $3,500 a month in those first 3 months. And I guess third, you're valued at $1 million 3 months after joining the program. So, you know, you could pair up with your co-founder after 5 weeks, and less than 2 months later, your company's worth $1 million based on our valuation. So I think kind of zero to pre-seed faster than any other incubator, especially because you're coming in pre-team, pre-idea, pre-company. So hopefully that answers your question. Looks like I have one more. I'm personally applying for econ as well. What would work with an econ major such as yourself would entail in a venture firm? So I just want to make sure I understand the question correctly. Are you asking if you were to apply to something like EF, what would I encourage outside of your econ major, or if you were trying to get into VC?
Personally, I do have an interest in like working in VC, such as yourself. So I personally was applying for econ as well. I just wanted to know about your like perspective on attaining that degree and your experience. If you find out that this is something more you'd like to discuss one-on-one, I'd be up for that as well.
That's okay. I'll discuss it with the room because I'm sure there's other people considering econ as a major. So truthfully, when I studied econ and math, and I thought I wanted to go into policy. And I took some like global economics classes and I was like, I'm going to change the world. And then I graduated and I actually started in a sales and marketing role where I was coaching tennis at the same time. I was a pretty competitive tennis player back in my time. And so I was doing the two of those and I was trying to build partnerships for the club and hotel I was working at. And basically, I met the director of Creative Destruction Lab through my time there because she was also involved with health and wellness company, and I was trying to partner with them. And so I just landed a good impression on her, and she told me about Creative Destruction Lab, and I thought like, wow, what an amazing program. Like especially where we're at with technology, I would have a way bigger impact doing that. And at that time, I was thinking about doing a master's in policy or furthering my education in econ, but ended up working at CDL. And that's where I was first exposed to so many startups. And once you see so many, you kind of learn like what are common mistakes people are making, what are investors looking for, and looking at those trends and the data there really excited me. And so when EF launched in Canada, I just thought to help them build the first cohort was just a huge opportunity and continue to grow entrepreneurship here in Canada. And so I mean, truthfully, in my undergrad, like I was a good student and I worked hard and I did some internships. They were actually more so in banking. And so my career early on shifted around a lot, but I would encourage you to get involved in like clubs where you're able to network. I think so much especially in the VC world too, is the network you build. Go to any kind of webinars like this, right? Like maybe 4 years from now, I'm still at EF and you're like, hey, I was the kid in Tech Under 20 that asked you about how to get into VC. And then there you go, that's already one connection. And so I would say network as much as you can. That's how you're gonna land the job. You're not gonna apply and interview and go through that process. I mean, you might, but I think it's becoming harder and harder to do that. So network is everything. That's what I'd say.
All right. I'd like to thank you for your kind words. And yeah, I've heard that like it's harder to become, like it's the same amount of becoming a baseball player. So it's pretty hard to get into a VC. So those connections would definitely help.
Yeah, absolutely. Add me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, for sure.
I have another question in here. Alexander Coles, I forget the exact details, but how does the market research phase and how do you make it through the first stage in terms of resources? Are you limited to domestic resources for whether you are located? Okay. So in terms of resources, it is a pretty much like self-driven incubator. So we curate that cohort for you. And so I don't know your background, but I'm just going to use an example because it'll be easier to follow. Let's say you come in with a computer science background, or maybe I'll use actually someone within the cohort. So someone that Lucy highlighted was Puria, who had an NLP background. He was coming out of his master's. He paired up with a previous founder who sold his company for $65 million. So Puria and Grant. Grant has a huge network in Toronto. He knows how to do it. He's done customer discovery before. Puria knows he wants to have an impact, but has no clue how to run a business, but he knows how to build the tech. So they start working together. He's learning so much from Grant and observing him do this customer discovery. We're running workshops that's very opt-in, opt-out. Like, is Grant, who sold this company for $65 million, going to come to our workshop on how to do customer discovery? Like, no, he should probably be giving it. But Puria might, because he would learn from that. And so really, the goal is by composing an ideal cohort with all these different people from different industries and different backgrounds, you can come in and be the strong technical person and they'll lead the commercial side. And so they know how to do, how to look for the right market and the product fit. And then in the meantime, you're getting mentorship once a week. So your mentor might say, you know what, why don't you talk to this person? And they'll make intros in their network too. So the mentorship is big. You have access to AWS credits. We do have a hardware partnership with Hacks. But I'd say the network each person brings in is what's been super impressive to me. So every Friday we have group pitches. And usually at the end of your group pitch, there's an ask to the room. Like, I'm looking to do customer discovery with this kind of profile, or I'm looking to build a partnership with a big e-commerce company. And then all of a sudden you have someone who was a couple months ago at Shopify and they're like, let me introduce you to product lead here, or you want to do customer discovery with data scientists? I know a ton. And so the answers actually come from the other people in the cohort. And that's what's been so powerful, because whether or not they move on to the next 3 months, their network all of a sudden is massive. But to dive into the global aspect, so the first 3 months, we ask everyone to be in Toronto and relocate in Toronto, even during COVID, because it's actually allowed them to work in person if they want. We can't force it, but at least if they're in close proximity, it gives them that option. And so we had more than 20 people relocate to Toronto for the first cohort. However, after 3 months, it's where you have the right to win. And if that is outside of Canada or outside of Toronto, that's where you should be. If you and your founder have randomly a huge market in maybe your parents are immigrants here and they have a huge business somewhere outside of Canada and you have an opportunity there, then that's where you should be. Or maybe your co-founder is from Vancouver and his network is massive there, then maybe that's where you should be. And so EF will continue to provide those intros and support you, but you should be where you have the right to win at that point in time.
All right, thank you.
Awesome. I know we have a few more minutes. If anyone else has any other questions, feel free to either pop in the chat or come off video and ask.
Oh, I have a question, Maya. That was a really good presentation, by the way. In terms of the investment, right? You said 10% for 100,000. Do you need, like, if we're in EF, do we need to accept that provide that 10% stake, or do we have the option to sort of move on from there?
So EF has the right to invest 100,000 for 10%. I guess at that point you can't not take it, because you're signing a contract at the beginning of your 3 months saying that if EF wants to, they reserve the right. However, if and that holds true if you met your co-founder in EF. So if you don't end up going through the program and you meet someone outside of EF, we no longer have those rights, even if your idea was developed in EF. But if you meet your co-founder in EF, then we have the right to invest 100,000 for 10%, which at that point you can't deny.
Gotcha. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, I feel like that might be all the questions. If not, please ask. Otherwise, it was so nice to meet all of you. I know you have lots of career decisions moving forward. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn or email me directly. I'm always happy to give advice where I can, make connections where I can. But I would love to see some ads on LinkedIn and stay in touch over the next couple of years and answer more questions if you have them.
For sure. Thank you so much, Maya and Lucy. Thank you to everyone for everyone else for joining us tonight, and hope you guys enjoy the rest of your weeks.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. That was really interesting. See ya.
It's a really good workshop. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, brother. Have a nice day.
See you.
Thank you.
Of course. See you.
Next time, could we have like a little networking session?
Yeah, definitely. I think I'll definitely pass that comment on to the Cup team. But yeah, we'll see what we can do. There were really good questions you asked there, Bashar. Good work.
Thank you. Yeah.
We could do it.
Yeah, let's go,
minute,
Bashar. Oh, we're still recording.